My name is Victor Hayes. I am 48 years old, and for the last 7 years, my life has been defined by two things: my son Toby, who is 12, and my work at Vertex Chemical. Toby is a bright boy, full of energy and endless questions, and providing for him has been my singular focus since his mother passed away 5 years ago. He is my entire world, the reason I push through the exhaustion every single day. Viridal Chemical was my stability. I am a senior chemical engineer there, developing proprietary polymer blends for high-durability plastics. Over the past 7 years, I poured my soul into those complex formulas. I sacrificed evenings, holidays, and countless weekends to ensure Vertex stayed ahead of industry competitors. I foolishly believed hard work would be rewarded with loyalty. That naive belief shattered completely on a rainy Tuesday morning in late October. I was called into the spacious corner office of Pamela Vance, the newly appointed regional director. Pamela viewed employees entirely as liabilities on a spreadsheet, variables to be eliminated to maximize profit. She sat behind her pristine desk, wearing a practiced expression of corporate sympathy that did not reach her calculating, icy eyes. "Victor," Pamela began, her voice smooth and practiced. "Verking Chemical is undergoing a strategic realignment. We are restructuring our compensation models to reflect current market realities and maintain operational efficiency." Rumors of budget cuts had circulated for weeks, but I assumed my tenure and vital contributions would shield me from the axe. "Effective at the end of the month," she continued. "Your position will be reclassified. Your new salary will be $34,000 annually." I stared at her in utter disbelief. $34,000. I currently made $85,000 a year. This was a staggering 60% pay cut. It was a blatant, transparent attempt to force me out without paying severance or dealing with legal complications. "I understand this is a significant adjustment," Pamela said, misreading my silence. "But we must make difficult decisions to protect the company. A 60% pay cut." My mind immediately went to Toby. How would I afford his school fees? How would we pay the mortgage? How would we survive on a fraction of our normal income? Panic threatened to rise in my throat, but I forced it down, replacing the fear with a cold, absolute clarity. I thought about the 7 years I gave Vertex. I thought about the millions of dollars my formulas generated for the executives, and I thought about Pamela Vance casually destroying my livelihood just to boost her quarterly performance metrics and secure her own bonus. "I see," I said, my voice completely steady. Pamela looked genuinely taken aback. She clearly expected explosive anger or tearful resignation. Instead, I simply nodded my head. "If those are the precise terms, Pamela, then I accept them." A flicker of surprise crossed her delicate features, swiftly replaced by a smug smirk. She had won, or so she falsely believed. She slid a revised employment contract across the smooth surface of the desk. "I am glad you are being reasonable, Victor. Please sign this acknowledgement so we can move forward." I signed my name with deliberate, measured care. As I handed the thick document back, a complex plan formed in my mind, fueled by righteous indignation and raw necessity. Viridal Chemical had made a critical, arrogant oversight by relying on a boilerplate employment agreement drafted many years ago. I knew the intellectual property assignment clause perfectly by heart. It explicitly stated that any inventions or formulas developed during standard business hours, using company equipment or materials, were the exclusive property of Vertex Chemical. The loophole was incredibly glaring to anyone paying attention. It did not cover work done outside of standard business hours, using personal equipment, entirely without company materials. The absolute truth was that my best work was never done in the sterile Vertex lab. The truly revolutionary formulas that saved the company. Millions were carefully developed at my kitchen table. Late at night, long after Toby had gone to sleep, I used my own personal computer, my personally purchased software, and independent research materials. I merely brought finished, perfected concepts into Vertex to run final physical verification tests. Under Title 35 of the United States Code regarding patent rights, an employer does not automatically own an invention created by an employee on their own time and utilizing their own resources, absent a specific ironclad agreement. Vertex's generic agreement was remarkably porous. I left Pamela's office with a binding contract reducing my pay, but also armed with the empowering knowledge that I held the keys to Vertex's most profitable manufacturing lines. The next morning, I took a personal day and drove downtown. I needed counsel who understood intellectual property law and would not be intimidated by a massive entity like Vertex Chemical. That was when I met Silas Montgomery. Silas was a seasoned intellectual property attorney with a ruthless, brilliant reputation. His pristine office was lined with thick legal volumes and framed case victories. When I sat down and thoroughly explained my situation, the drastic pay cut, the poorly worded contract, the revolutionary formulas created at home, his eyes sharpened with unmistakable predatory interest. I detailed the exact wording of my employment agreement, heavily emphasizing the specific restrictions regarding standard business hours and company materials. I explained exactly how I independently developed the core algorithms, keeping meticulous digital logs and timestamps on my home computer that completely predated any related work at Vertex facilities. Silas listened intently, taking rapid notes on a yellow legal pad. "Victor," Silas said, leaning back in his leather chair, "if your documentation is as flawlessly solid as you claim, you are in a uniquely powerful position. You did not just create a chemical mixture. You created foundational intellectual property that falls completely outside the scope of your assignment clause. By implementing those formulas into active production without a formal licensing agreement, Vertex Chemical may be committing willful patent infringement or serious misappropriation of trade secrets." He tapped his heavy pen against the mahogany desk. "The legal precedent here is abundantly clear. When an employee uses their own resources outside of normal working hours to invent something, the employer only gains a non-exclusive shop-right license at best, and only if company resources were used to actually reduce it to practice. But if you can definitively prove entirely independent development, they might not even possess that basic right." "I can absolutely prove it," I said firmly. "I have secure digital footprints, personal purchase receipts for the expensive modeling software, and time-stamped emails sent to my encrypted private server weeks before I ever brought testing data to Vertex." Silas nodded, a shark-like smile appearing. "Excellent. We will immediately draft the necessary patent applications and secure your exclusive rights officially. In the meantime, you will continue to work normally at Vertex. Be the absolute model employee, smile at Pamela Vance, and quietly collect your $34,000 a year." "And then," I asked, "when the timing is strategically perfect, we formally present Pamela Vance with a bill for licensing fees that will make her 60% pay cut look like mere pocket change. Or we legally enjoin them from using the formulas altogether and watch their entire production line grind to a devastating halt." I left Silas's downtown office feeling a profound, revitalizing sense of purpose. Pamela Vance had tried to crush my spirit and destroy my ability to provide for Toby. She had absolutely no idea her callous greed had just armed me with the perfect, unstoppable weapon. The impending revenge would not be loud, messy, or violent. It would be cold, fiercely legal, and devastatingly precise. I sat across the heavy mahogany desk from Silas Montgomery, a lawyer whose reputation for corporate litigation preceded him like a rolling thunderstorm. His office occupied the 42nd floor, overlooking the sprawling city below. I slid my meticulously organized file across the polished wood, watching carefully as Silas adjusted his spectacles and began to read. The silence stretched for 20 long minutes, punctuated only by the crisp rustle of thick paper. Finally he looked up, a sharp glint illuminating his pale blue eyes. The employment contracts Vertex forced upon me were deeply flawed, exactly as I had suspected, but Silas confirmed the sheer magnitude of their legal vulnerability. He leaned forward, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that commanded absolute attention. He deliberately invoked Title 17, Section 106 of the United States Code, laying out the precise legal boundaries of exclusive rights. According to the federal statute, the owner of copyright under this specific title possesses the exclusive rights to do and to authorize reproducing the copyrighted work, preparing derivative works, and distributing copies to the public by sale. However, my situation extended far beyond mere copyright infringement. It bled into the realm of patent law and misappropriation of trade secrets. Vertex had failed to secure the necessary legal assignments for the proprietary algorithms I developed off the clock, using my own personal equipment. Silas explained that my employers were operating under the arrogant delusion that paying my monthly salary automatically granted them blanket ownership of my mind. It was a breach of fiduciary duty waiting to explode if they attempted to monetize the modular framework I built independently. We spent 3 hours going over the intricate nuances of my leverage. Silas assured me with cold certainty that if Vertex attempted to launch their flagship product integrating my stolen framework, a swift federal injunction would instantly freeze their entire operation. We drafted a cease and desist letter, preparing it to be fired off the moment they crossed the point of no return. I felt a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. The trap I was building was legal, binding, and devastating. I thanked Silas, shook his hand, and walked out feeling like a man holding a loaded weapon. The following afternoon, I found myself in a radically different environment. The global headquarters of Apex Industries, Vertex's primary competitor, was a masterclass in sleek architectural design. Expansive glass walls replaced the suffocating cubicles I was accustomed to navigating. I was discreetly ushered into an expansive executive suite where Nathan Brooks stood waiting. Nathan was everything my current superiors were not. He was energetic, perceptive, and acutely aware of the rapidly shifting tides in our highly competitive industry. He shook my hand with genuine enthusiasm, having already thoroughly reviewed the redacted portfolio I sent over prior to our confidential meeting. We bypassed the usual corporate pleasantries and dove straight into the complex technical architecture of our industry. I described my long-term vision, carefully omitting the sensitive proprietary details of the framework. Vertex was currently trying to steal from me, but offering more than enough technical insight to prove my undeniable capability. Nathan listened intently, nodding his head slowly as I systematically dismantled the glaring limitations of market-standard software architecture. When I finally finished my presentation, he did not hesitate. He simply leaned back in his leather chair, steepled his fingers together, and made his play. He offered me double my salary, effective immediately upon my resignation from Vertex. He paired this with a signing bonus that would comfortably eliminate the remaining balance of my home mortgage. More importantly, he offered a contractual guarantee of intellectual property protection for any independent projects I developed outside of my designated scope of work at Apex Industries. It was a staggering validation of my true worth. For 7 long years, I had foolishly allowed myself to be severely undervalued, naively believing that blind loyalty would eventually be rewarded. Nathan's offer laid bare the lie I had been living. I told him I needed exactly 1 week to tidy up my affairs at my current job. He agreed instantly, a knowing smile playing on his lips, clearly understanding that I was about to orchestrate an explosive exit they would never forget. Returning to the tense atmosphere of Vertex on Thursday morning required a performance worthy of a seasoned stage actor. I walked into the bleak building with a practiced expression of mild stress and compliance. My manager intercepted me near the break room, demanding a detailed progress update on the final integration phase of the stolen algorithms. I played the part of the overwhelmed but dedicated employee to perfection. I rubbed the bridge of my nose, sighing heavily, and requested more time. I claimed that the integration was encountering unexpected bugs, explaining that the delicate transition from my local environment to the company's servers required a gentle touch to avoid a catastrophic failure. It was a fabrication. My underlying code was pristine and robust. The delay was synthetic, designed to give me the window of time I needed to arm the metaphorical bomb hidden deep within their infrastructure. My manager scowled fiercely, his face turning a shade of red, but he ultimately bought the excuse, reminding me of the strict deadlines imposed by the executive board. I nodded subserviently and assured him everything would be ready for the big executive reveal on Monday morning. As he walked away, grumbling, I returned to my desk and fired up my terminal. The remainder of my week was spent building my exit strategy. I methodically documented absolutely everything. I saved every single email demanding. I hand over the unauthorized code and archived every veiled threat disguised as corporate protocol. I recorded every instance where they ignored my written warnings regarding lawful ownership. I forwarded this massive mountain of evidence to a secure remote server, creating a digital trail that no corporate fixer could ever erase. I then began quietly revoking my personal access tokens from the repositories that housed the core structural logic of my framework, replacing them with useless dummy dependencies that looked identical but would fail spectacularly upon compilation. By the time the executives realized the engine they stole was completely hollowed out, I would be long gone, sitting in Nathan Brooks' pristine office, watching Vertex crumble under the weight of their arrogance. I was no longer a helpless victim. I was the grand architect of their ruin. The mahogany doors of the executive boardroom loomed at the far end of the corridor. I did not knock. I simply pushed the doors open, drawing the immediate attention of all 12 board members. My focus locked onto Pamela. She sat rigid at the head of the long table. Her expression froze into a mask of indignation. "Victor," Pamela snapped, her voice like ice, "this is a closed executive session. You do not have clearance to be here, or the right to interrupt us. Security will be called if you do not turn around this instant." The other executives shifted in their high-backed leather chairs, exchanging glances. I did not stop walking until I reached the opposite end of the table, standing directly across from Pamela. I slowly opened my portfolio and withdrew the thick sheaf of high-bond paper I had printed that morning. "I will only take a few moments of your time," I said, my voice projecting effortlessly across the expanse of polished wood. "I am here regarding the unilateral pay reduction you issued to me yesterday. I have reviewed the revised employment contract." Pamela sneered, dropping her pen onto the table with a clatter. "If you have a grievance with human resources, you take it up with them. We are discussing quarterly projections. You are out of line, and frankly, you are jeopardizing what little remains of your career here." I smiled, a tight, controlled expression that caused the color to drain slightly from her cheeks. "My career here is already over, Pamela, but our business relationship is just beginning." I slid the first copy of the document down the length of the table. It came to a smooth stop directly in front of her folded hands. "What is this?" she demanded, refusing to touch the paper. "That is a licensing agreement," I replied, "for the proprietary synthetic compounds and the related chemical formulas I developed over the past 18 months. You see, when you restructured my contract 2 years ago to strip away my benefits, you also voided the original intellectual property assignment clause." My counsel and I reviewed the paperwork. Under Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106, I retain the exclusive rights to reproduce and distribute derivatives of those independent creations. Because I used my own equipment and off-the-clock hours to finalize the synthesis, the shop-right doctrine does not apply to grant the company a non-exclusive license. "You do not own the formulas, Pamela." "I do." A collective gasp rippled through the room. The vice president of operations leaned forward and picked up a copy of the agreement, his eyes scanning the legal text. Pamela's face flushed a crimson. She stood up, bracing both hands on the table and glaring at me with venom. "You arrogant little fool," Pamela hissed, her composure breaking apart. "We paid your salary for half a decade. We own everything that comes out of your brain. I will bury you in litigation so deep you will not see daylight for 20 years. I will sue you for breach of fiduciary duty, conversion of corporate assets, and economic espionage. You will never work in this industry again." Her threats echoed off the glass walls, desperate and loud. The other executives remained silent, watching the unraveling of their infallible leader. "Litigation requires solid legal grounds," I countered, my tone conversational and relaxed. "And a lengthy discovery process is something you cannot afford. If you pursue a lawsuit against me, my counterclaims will include a demand for all internal communications." I reached into my portfolio and extracted a thinner stack of papers, dropping it onto the table. "This is an archive of the emails you and the executive team sent over the last 3 years. They contain explicit directives to falsify safety reports, coordinated efforts to create a hostile work environment, and documented intent of retaliation against employees who raise compliance concerns." Pamela stared at the stack of emails, the fight draining out of her posture. The silence was deafening. "If we go to court," I continued, "those internal records become public domain. The regulatory fines alone would bankrupt this company long before a judge ever looked at my intellectual property case. I paused, letting the reality of their situation settle over them like a blanket. But I am not an unreasonable man. I am offering you a legally sound way out of this. I pointed to the licensing agreement still resting in front of Pamela. The terms are non-negotiable. You will pay a monthly licensing fee for the continued use of my chemical formulas. If you look closely at the payment schedule, you will notice that the monthly fee is exactly equal to the amount you attempted to deduct from my salary yesterday. I buttoned my suit jacket, feeling a sense of closure. Also, you should know I submitted my formal resignation to Human Resources 10 minutes ago. I have accepted a senior director position at Apex Industries. They were impressed by my independent portfolio. I checked my watch. You have 48 hours to sign that agreement and wire the first month of licensing fees to my account. If the deadline passes without payment, I issue a cease and desist, and I take my formulas exclusively to Apex Industries. I turned my back on Pamela and the executives, walking toward the mahogany doors with the absolute certainty of a man who had finally won. The heavy doors of Vertex Chemicals' boardroom were closed to me now, but the shockwaves of their emergency meeting reached me loud and clear. My legal team informed me on a crisp Tuesday morning that the board of directors had formally accepted our licensing agreement. They had no alternative except a protracted legal battle they were guaranteed to lose, given the clear protections afforded under Title 35 of the United States Code regarding patent ownership. The terms were exactly as I had dictated: an upfront payment of $3 million and a 15% royalty on all gross sales of the agricultural compounds, utilizing my proprietary stabilization technique. The professional fallout for Pamela was swift and brutal. When the board discovered her attempt to claim my work as the company's property, without a valid assignment clause, they launched an internal investigation. The corporate attorneys concluded that Pamela had committed a severe breach of fiduciary duty. She had jeopardized the company's most lucrative product line and exposed Vertex Chemical to massive liabilities. By Friday, her office was packed into cardboard boxes. Security guards escorted her out in front of the research division. She was terminated for cause, stripping her of her unvested stock options and her golden parachute. The woman who had tried to erase my contributions was now a cautionary tale. I shifted my focus to my role at Apex Industries. Stepping into their state-of-the-art facility on my first day felt like breathing pure oxygen. They appointed me Senior Director of Applied Chemistry, a position with a generous research budget, brilliant scientists, and an employment contract carving out my rights to any intellectual property I developed on my own time. The corporate culture at Apex was everything Vertex was not. There was genuine collaboration and a profound respect for the scientific method. I spent my first few weeks drafting protocols for a groundbreaking project involving biodegradable polymers for industrial packaging. My personal life was finally stabilizing. The influx of the licensing revenue meant I could afford the absolute best specialized medical care for Toby. His health improved dramatically. His energy returned in full force, transforming him back into the vibrant, curious boy he was always meant to be. With financial worries eradicated, we moved into a spacious house with a large backyard. To celebrate his recovery, I took Toby to the local animal shelter. We walked past dozens of noisy cages before a scruffy golden-haired mixed breed pressed his wet nose against the fence. Toby instantly fell in love. We signed the adoption papers that afternoon and named him Barnaby. Within days, the dog became an inseparable part of our family, constantly trailing after Toby in the yard. For the first time in years, I felt a profound sense of peace. The illusion of permanent safety was shattered late one Thursday evening. I was sitting at my kitchen island, sipping tea and reviewing some technical specifications, when my phone vibrated. The caller ID displayed a local number I did not recognize. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello, Victor?" a hushed, nervous voice asked. "Speaking," I replied. "Who is this?" "It is Clara. Clara Reed. I was a junior chemist in your old department, at Vertex." I remembered Clara. She was a quiet, meticulous researcher who always double-checked her instrument calibrations and never engaged in the toxic office politics. "Clara, of course. How are things over there?" Not good, she whispered, her voice tight with anxiety. I am calling you from a prepaid burner phone. I did not want to use my personal device. What is going on over there? After they fired Pamela, the board brought in an interim director named Julian Vance. He has been aggressively going through all of your old lab notebooks. Victor, he is not just reviewing them. He has ordered my team to start running off the books experiments based on your proprietary process. They have a license to use the process, I reminded Clara. That is exactly what the agreement covers. You do not understand, Clara insisted. Vance is specifically trying to alter the chemical pathways just enough to bypass your patent claims. He explicitly told us to find a functional loophole in the synthesis steps so they can claim it is a completely novel, non-infringing process. He wants to legally void the licensing agreement by proving they do not need your methodology. If he succeeds, they intend to stop paying your royalties entirely. I took a slow, deep breath to steady my pulse. What Clara was describing was a calculated attempt to design around the patent. This sounded like it crossed the line into willful infringement under Section 271 of the Patent Act, especially if the changes were merely insubstantial alterations covered under the doctrine of equivalence. Are you absolutely certain about this, Clara? I asked, my voice deadly calm. I am looking at his internal strategy memos right now, she said. He is pushing the organic chemistry team to work double shifts to find an alternative catalyst that yields the exact same stability metrics but technically falls outside the structural scope of your claims. You built this formula, Victor. They are trying to steal your life's work from you all over again. Do you have physical copies of these memos? I asked. I managed to print a few pages, she replied. I can mail them to your house, but I am terrified they will find out. If Vance realizes I leaked this confidential information, he will destroy my career. Do not mail them yet, I instructed firmly. Keep them completely hidden. I will arrange a secure, untraceable way to receive the documents from you. You have done the right thing, Clara. I cannot thank you enough for taking this massive risk to warn me. We disconnected the call, and I stared at the dark screen of my phone. Vertex Chemical had removed Pamela, but the ruthless corporate greed that had empowered her was still deeply entrenched in the company's operational DNA. They honestly thought I was just a naive scientist who had gotten exceptionally lucky with a legal technicality. They thought I would simply take my payout, retreat to my new laboratory, and passively fade into the background. They were catastrophically wrong. I had fought too hard and risked everything to secure my son's future to let a new corporate suit dismantle my work. The war was not truly over. The battlefield had merely shifted, and this time I was ready to tear them down completely. The air in the laboratory at Apex Industries smelled entirely different from my former workspace. It was crisp, carrying the faint sterile scent of ozone and the underlying metallic tang of unbridled innovation. Apex had given me a blank slate, an entire division dedicated to redefining industrial sanitation, and I was not about to squander the opportunity. I had recruited a team of brilliant minds, individuals who possessed the same insatiable curiosity and meticulous attention to detail that I demanded of myself. They were chemists, engineers, and systems analysts, forming a multidisciplinary unit unlike anything Vertex Corporation had ever envisioned. We were not merely formulating new cleaning solutions. We were designing an entire integrated paradigm. For months, we labored in a state of continuous, focused intensity. My previous work, the very formulas that my former employer had ruthlessly claimed as their own, had been built on a foundation of chemical reactivity. I knew the intimate flaws and the fundamental limitations of those compounds. They were effective, yes, but they were isolated tools. My vision for Apex was a holistic, comprehensive ecosystem. We named the internal project simply Synthesis. The core of Synthesis was a proprietary delivery mechanism, an automated sensor-driven dispersion network that analyzed surface contaminants in real-time and adjusted the chemical payload accordingly. The cleaning agents themselves were entirely novel, utilizing bioenzymatic pathways that rendered my old, stolen formulas completely obsolete. We were not just competing, we were rendering the competition irrelevant. I worked meticulously with the legal team at Apex Industries to ensure that our intellectual property was ironclad. We did not merely patent the individual chemical compounds. We filed comprehensive claims covering the entire integrated method, the hardware systems, the algorithmic analysis of contaminants, and the precise synergistic interactions of the bioenzymes. Under the protections afforded by Title 35 of the United States Code, particularly those sections relating to utility patents and complex systemic processes, our intellectual property formed a virtually impenetrable fortress. We also structured our corporate agreements to strictly avoid any breach of fiduciary duty, ensuring that every contributor was legally protected and fairly compensated, a stark contrast to my previous experience. Any attempt to replicate our results using conventional means would fall spectacularly short. To copy our system would require a blatant, indefensible infringement of multiple interrelated patents. When we finally launched the synthesis system to the public market, the industry response was an instantaneous, seismic shift. The efficiency metrics were staggering, the environmental impact was drastically reduced, and the cost savings for large-scale industrial clients were undeniable. Within a span of 45 days, the dominant position Vertex Corporation had enjoyed began to crumble. Word reached me through the quiet channels of the industry that panic had set in at my former workplace. The executives who had so arrogantly dismissed my contributions, who had stolen my intellectual property and banished me, were now staring into the abyss of obsolescence. Their flagship products, the very formulas they had wrested from my hands, were suddenly outdated, expensive, and alarmingly inefficient compared to our new paradigm. Client after client defected. Contracts that Vertex had considered secure for the next decade were abruptly terminated. The penalty clauses willingly paid just to gain access to the Apex synthesis system. The financial bleed at Vertex became a hemorrhage. Their stock plummeted, losing 30% of its value in a single quarter and then another 20% the next. The industry analysts were merciless in their assessments. Vertex, they declared, had failed to innovate, relying on stolen glory while the true visionary had moved on. It took exactly 14 months for Vertex Corporation to reach the brink of insolvency. They were bleeding capital, entirely unable to match the technological leap we had achieved. It was then that the board of directors at Apex Industries made their move. It was not a hostile takeover. It was a quiet, inevitable absorption. Apex acquired Vertex Corporation for a fraction of its former valuation, a mere rounding error in the grand scheme of our booming revenue. The acquisition brought a profound, almost surreal sense of closure. The executives who had orchestrated my downfall were quietly dismissed, their severance meager consolations for their hubris. As part of the restructuring, the chief executive officer of Apex Industries offered me a newly created position, Global Director of Research and Development. Overseeing the combined operations of both companies, I accepted the role without hesitation. Returning to the Vertex building was a profound experience. The grand glass doors, which had once felt like the gates of a prison, now parted smoothly to admit me. The lobby was exactly as I remembered it, yet the atmosphere had irrevocably changed. The oppressive weight of corporate paranoia and cutthroat ambition had vanished, replaced by an apprehensive, quiet expectation. I walked into the main laboratory, the exact room where I had poured years of my life into the formulas they had stolen. The remaining staff, those who had survived the purge of the old management, looked at me with a mixture of awe and trepidation. They remembered the quiet, diligent chemist who had been unceremoniously discarded. They were now looking at their new leader. I did not offer them a speech of vengeance or triumph. I offered them a path forward. I gathered them in the center of the laboratory and spoke of collaboration, of genuine scientific inquiry, and of a culture where credit was given, where it was due. I explained that the era of stolen ideas and hidden achievements was permanently closed. From this moment onward, we were a unified entity, dedicated to the relentless pursuit of excellence. The transformation was not instantaneous, but it was steady. I spent my days dismantling the toxic hierarchies that had choked the life out of Vertex. I instituted open-door policies, transparent peer review systems, and profit-sharing models for patent-producing scientists. Slowly, the fear dissipated, replaced by a genuine, burgeoning enthusiasm. Standing by the window of my new office, which had once belonged to the executive who orchestrated my dismissal, I looked out over the sprawling industrial park. The sky was a clear, unyielding blue. The revenge I had achieved was not loud, violent, or explosive. It was a quiet, meticulous revolution. I had not merely destroyed my enemies, I had absorbed them, neutralized them, and built something far greater upon the ashes of their arrogance. I had proven that true innovation, coupled with an unwavering commitment to integrity and strategic foresight, could dismantle even the most entrenched corruption. The victory was absolute, and the future, unwritten and expansive, belonged entirely to me.